let's say at some point the prodigal leaves home again and he comes back and the father does it again. I'm going to forgive you. Give him a robe, a ring, sandals. Let's throw a feast.
Mm-hmm.
He leaves home again, comes back home, says, you know what? I'm forgiving him. Let's bring the robe, the ring, the sandals, the feast. At some point, that piece of the family pie is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because this younger brother is eating into the older brother's riches and devouring them. And at some point, it runs out. Here's the great news about Jesus. The righteousness that he gives us is an infinite righteousness. As much as we draw from it, we will never diminish how much is available.
Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we take a deeper dive into Sunday's message and explore any questions you might have. I'm your host, AJ Stevens, joined by lead pastor Chip Parker, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops. We're back Monday morning. I say it every Monday, and I look forward to this. It's always a good time. I know this morning we have 3 microphones out, and Chip, you're on one.
I got it. I'm here.
And then to my left is the man, the myth, the legend, who said he's going to call me out at some point in this podcast today. But Chris, the deucer.
That is right. I'm here at the table.
That's good.
I invited myself here.
Well, I think, he's had the microphone before. Mm-hmm. I do not think it's by coincidence that the week after we called him out for being a cat person and he was fuming on the couch without a microphone, that he's like, no, I got to get on the microphone now. We're not going to be dissing cats on this podcast.
Yeah. Let me say this. I have thoroughly enjoyed receiving your opinions out there on whether you're a cat person or a dog person. And I'm glad that the majority of you that I talked to enjoyed that little piece of information.
Cat and dog theology. Welcome to the Orchard.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also glad that most of you aren't cat people like Chris. So there's that.
That's okay.
So a couple housekeeping things around the Orchard. I know there's something in particular that you guys have been asking for, and we had a guy come up and say, hey, could be a good idea. Do you guys think you can make this happen? And I was like, yeah, let's try that. Let's see if it works. And we got this order of camo hats, and they've been like, everybody wants one. And so
that's what I hear. Okay, so we need to pause right here, because I'm not sure AJ is being 100% honest with me on this, because I'm not sure if this isn't AJ saying, oh yeah, there was a guy, and it's like Paul in the New Testament saying, yeah, I know a guy, and it was Paul talking about Paul. And so I'm not sure this isn't AJ saying, I had a guy, and that guy was AJ telling himself, we need camo hats. Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're that guy, I need you to shoot me a text to confirm that my Lake City location pastor is not lying to my face here.
Yeah, well, this guy is real. And you should confirm with a text, Cody, because I think it's a good thing. In fact, me and this guy, he's so real that him and I went frog gigging in these hats together, baby. And we this is completely sidetrack again, but I haven't frog gigged since I was like 18 years old, Chip.
Is gigged the proper past tense there?
Gig, what do you think it would be?
I don't know.
I think it's got to be frog gigging.
Gagged? I don't know.
I ain't saying frog gag. We went frog gigging, and dude, I was out there like chest deep in the water, and I'm like, this is it. This is living. This is peak life. Why have I not done this since I was like 17, 18 years old? And it was absolutely incredible. In fact, we went really close to where we're recording this podcast, and I don't know if this is going to get me in trouble with Michael or anybody else. But
well, I'm not worried about Michael. I'd be more worried about FWC, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that should be fine. It's private property, and we kind of own it, right?
So river management or water management.
This pond?
I don't know. I'm asking.
This has got to be our pond. So
I know about the Bible and Batman and baseball. That's my thing.
Well, we went to the church pond, and they're draining it. This week we got construction going all around here. One of the guys was sitting out here, and he was like listening one night, and he's like, dude, there's a ton of frogs back here. We got to go get them. And this was last year, and whenever we had heard that they were about to fill this pond in, I texted him. I was like, hey, dude, it's now or never. If we're going to get them, we got to go get them because they're about to fill this pond in. And so we got out there. We're texting the wives. We got to go. We got to be out there at like 10 o'clock and start getting these frogs. And we got 44 frogs.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, 40. And I'm talking about like, if you're listening to this and you're a frog person, which is probably like one of you, I'm talking about like hammer knockers, like big old, it was awesome.
You're not getting frogs, you're getting toads at that point.
Yeah. Well, toads are a different species. But yeah, toad-esque, right? That's
What's
the term.
The difference between a toad and a frog?
I got no idea.
No, yeah, that's good. No, I don't know.
They're both amphibians, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess.
So is that your take this week?
No, I don't know the difference between a toad and a frog, but I do have a couple of fun facts for you about bullfrogs since we're on the subject. Okay, the bullfrog can jump distances 10 times their body length, and a full-grown bullfrog can jump as far as 6 feet. So if you're standing 6 feet away from a bullfrog and you think you're safe, you're not. What's that old saying? The odds of getting killed by a bullfrog are low, but never zero, right?
I'm not sure that's an old saying or one you just made up on the spot. I'm not confident.
Well, you insert, like, you remove bullfrog and put whatever you want there. But yeah, pretty fascinating. They lay 25,000 eggs.
Oh, wow.
Per batch.
Wow.
One female.
That's crazy.
There it is. There's my nerd out. You guys.
It's a lot of tadpoles.
It's a lot of hopefully, right? Because I'm sure some of those get eaten by stuff. But yeah, hopefully a lot of tadpoles for the next generation to get out there and go gigging, baby. I love it.
Well, so how many eggs?
25,000.
Okay, so 44 frogs seems less impressive now. I don't know.
Touche.
So talking about weird stats that like blow your mind, I was riding with Chasen this week. Chasen, for those of you who have listened, you may already know, or you may just know anyway, is my 10-year-old, and Chasen is like Mr. Nerd Out guy. Like he's nerd out. That's what he does on all things science, and he loves it. And so we're riding down the road, and he looks up at a cloud and says, "How much do you think clouds weigh?" And I said, I don't guess I know. He goes, "Well, I'm pretty sure that they weigh a lot." And I said, "Well, like, what do you mean by a lot?" And he said, "I'm pretty sure clouds weigh well over a ton."
That's crazy.
I said, "There's no way." And he's like, "Yeah, actually, I'm pretty sure they weigh like 1,000,000 tons. And sure enough, that is absolutely correct. Get this. Google search. The typical fair weather cumulus cloud weighs about 1,400,000,000 pounds.
The odds of getting killed by a cloud are low, but never zero.
How crazy is that? And it's the density of the cloud that makes it stay up, not how light it is. It's less dense than the air, but 1,400,000,000 pounds for your average cloud.
That's actually insane.
Isn't it?
I would have never guessed that.
Right.
Chasen is full. Isn't Chasen the one who was like, "Hey, teacher, what's that? Is it Ron Burgundy where he walks into Home Depot and he's like, 'No, I know more than you. Don't
Not
help
Ron
me.'"
Burgundy. That's Anchorman. This is Ron Swanson.
Ron Swanson. Sorry. Yeah. He walks into Home Depot and he's like, "No, I don't need your help. I know more than you." It's like, I feel like that's Chasen.
So, true story, Chasen was in science class in 3rd grade, and they come to a section about space, and Chasen tells the teacher that he thinks he should be teaching this class, or this section, because he knows more than the teacher. And then she said, "Well, Chasen, there are experts that wrote this chapter in your book." He says, "Yeah, but I probably know more than them too."
I love that. That's like the ultimate form of like, I am the man. You
and
know
in
what I mean?
fairness, the kid knows a lot about space. It's pretty crazy.
That's good. I love it. Chris, what about you?
I can see it. I mean, water, 8 pounds a gallon, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. As you were saying that, I was thinking like, man,
It's in a different format, but still.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, if this was like a church podcast, we could like talk about the Trinity.
Yeah.
You know? Ice, water, steam.
Avatar. That's my pitch. All right. Chris, what do you got? What's your
Is it time to call you out?
random? I mean, if you're feeling froggy, then jump, buddy. You know what I mean?
See, I see what I did.
You see what I did there? That's
Nice.
good.
I want to know your references on the fact that cats are the #1 predator of small game.
Oh, you think I'm wrong? It was on actually.
I'm not sure he's saying you're wrong. I think he's saying you're a liar.
Let me see here. I don't know. It had been a while since I saw it, but it was a government website.
Source.
Trust
TMB.
me, bro.
TMB. Trust me, bro.
No, I did see that they're one of the top.
Okay, so
but they
who was
can't
number one?
conclusively say who is at the top because I saw the red fox up there.
Oh, so you're saying there's not enough research to confirm it, but it's highly likely.
Can't say conclusively.
Yeah.
So,
is this your
but
just
when I
guilty
looked it up,
conscience?
it said the red fox.
Is this your guilty conscience, like trying to justify having a cat, Chris?
No.
All right, I'm just checking.
I'm
just
sure.
asking.
Hey, so what does the fox say?
Dax would tell you, ring a ding ding.
I was wondering if we could get AJ just to send it right there.
Speaking of real
trigger
quick,
a reflex.
Before we get off of this stuff, and kids and useless knowledge, one of our friends said, I want to take Dax and Madeline to Dino World this weekend. And so we met her in Alachua, and I have no idea. It's in Florida somewhere.
Oh, I bet they're doing that like at the Florida Museum of Natural History or whatever in Gainesville.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. And so, because they live in Ocala now. And so we dropped them off, and I texted her later that week, and I was like, hey, are you impressed by my kids' like knowledge of dinosaurs? And she goes, actually, it's incredible. They have this one area where you stick your hands like in a box that you can't see, and you have to feel different dinosaurs at different stations, and you can't see it. And she said Dax went like 7 for 7 on dinosaurs that he couldn't see, that he just told me were the dinosaurs by the way that he could feel them, which is
that's solid,
fascinating,
incredible,
proud, but also a little like maybe we should watch something else, Buzz out. Let's mix up the TV.
That's also, I don't know how I don't know that I would feel very comfortable in a museum sticking my hand into a box that I couldn't see to feel an object inside. Like, I don't know. Are you guys weird about that? Like sticking your hand places you can't see?
I mean, a little bit. But I would do it.
I'll be honest.
I would do it.
It freaks me out.
I'd be a little scared, though.
It freaks me out.
Yeah. That doesn't bug me a whole lot. But you're the second person that said that, because you're the second person, second, third people that I've told that to. And the first one said the exact same thing. First of all, I would never stick my hand somewhere I couldn't see.
I know. That just freaks me out. Irrational fear. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, Chris, if you find any extensive research that can confirm the red fox is the apex predator of small game outside of the feral house cat, I would love to see it. Until then, I'm going to have to stick to my guns.
Okay, yeah, stick to your guns.
So keep me posted.
It just depends on the ecosystem and like where it's happening and stuff like that. They said more in like urban areas it's possible, but like in rural areas, not really.
That makes sense. We have a little both and. In fact, we had a cat at our house the other day, and then as I was walking back to the back of our property, I looked to my right, and there's a red fox standing there staring at me, kind of like crunched down. So
I think your doves are safe.
You think so?
From the feral cat. But,
I think
from the red fox, probably not.
Yeah, I don't think, if I have both of them, I don't think there's a fighting chance for anything small out there. It's just going to get ugly quick. Well, that's good. We spent a lot of time on the front end talking about fun stuff like that and useless knowledge. And if you're impressed by it, but you think you're more impressive, we would love for you to submit through the website maybe your most incredible useless fact, right? Your little nerd out section. I would love to hear them.
We did get a submission on the website this week, right?
We did get a submission.
We sure did.
From Amanda in Live Oak. And she said, hi there. So
what's up, Amanda?
Hey, Amanda.
Don't know which Amanda you are. Don't know, if there was something you meant to say on the back end, but if you did,
maybe she's just being nice, giving us a shout out. I appreciate that.
Maybe so.
We're here giving her a shout out.
Yeah,
in response.
We're reciprocating it.
We want you to know, Amanda, we see you.
Yeah, and not just you, Amanda, but Amanda's everywhere, because we don't really know which Amanda this was. So shout out to Amanda's. We appreciate you guys engaging. But that's a good segue. And when I say good segue, I mean there's really no reason at all to segue from there. But we're going to segue because we got to eventually get into the content that people probably listen for in the first place and probably tolerate.
That's probably a safer assumption than cats or foxes being apex predators. But go ahead.
Frogs. All right, so this week we dove into the last week of The Prodigal, right? And it's been such an awesome series. I know, Chris, you said that week you shouted out the book. You had talked to several people that took you up on that and actually ended up getting the book and reading the book. And so
did you finish it?
I did.
Yeah. So
it was super exciting.
Give me your thoughts. What did you think about the book?
I really liked it, which I listened to it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
that counts.
I don't know. It was just.
Yeah, I'm a firm advocate I feel like audiobooks count as books. So go ahead.
Yeah, you got to listen to it, and then I got to hear y'all speak and break it down. Mm-hmm. This week I was in Brantford, so I got to hear Eddie break it down in his way. So
what was like your biggest takeaway from the book?
Just hearing the part about the older brother, which is what we're diving into this week. Because, I'm more aligned with the older brother, like you were saying last week, and just kind of challenging, those thought process that we have in religious circles to scrutinize people that are sinners.
Yeah, absolutely.
And think that we're maybe better because of our obedience.
Yeah, we think that our sin puts us in a whole nother category than, quote, sinners. And I think the book does a great job of just talking about how that's not true. And like I said, that book for me is probably the most impactful book, definitely one of the most impactful books I've ever read on my spiritual life. And I'm not going to say like my, quote, ministry or preaching or theology, but as a follower of Jesus, it was really good for me because I was that good kid who had to realize at some point I was never good enough. That's not what it was about. Pastor Matt in Live Oak kind of summarized it like this when he was closing out the services yesterday. He said, you got to come to face the fact that your salvation is not based on your character or your actions. Your salvation is based wholly on the character and actions of Jesus in your place.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really good summarized way to put that. But man, I heard a lot of people reading the book. Even, yesterday, several people texted me, hey, what was the name of that book? Even the very first week in Lake City, I gave out a couple of copies.
Yeah.
So that's always encouraging to me, because what we want to do is we want Sunday morning to be engaging. We want Sunday morning to be informative. Most of all, we want it to be transformative, where you look like Jesus on the other side of it. But I don't want the Orchard, quote, pulpit on Sunday morning to be the only place that our people are exposed to this kind of stuff. I want to introduce them to a broader world of fantastic thinkers and guys who are smarter and more articulate and more passionate than I'll ever be. Yeah. Because when you learn from those guys too, it's pretty incredible. So that was exciting to me. I think that was a great challenge.
Yeah, it gave me an opportunity, and I'm sure a lot of other people, to kind of dive back into studying something outside of, just kind of normal reading, and actually study the word. And I don't know.
That's good.
That's what, for me, that's what kind of helpful.
I think he actually, a few years ago, or he probably didn't, it was probably the publishing company, released the Prodigal God as a study guide too. So you can actually take notes in it and go through. I'm curious, do you remember just ballpark how long the book was on audiobook?
I think it was 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's a super short book. You can fly through it. So
it's 5 car rides for me, coming to town and back. So, I mean, you can knock that out pretty quick.
That's one thing I miss, though, living close to town, is that I can't dive into a book. I have to clean the floors in the house or something. Do the dishes
yeah. That's cool. So that's good, though. I think that's a good jumping off point for the conversation, because one of the things we said, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, the struggle with the older brotherness, I guess both of you in a way, right? Said that's kind of where you resonate the most. But as we dive into this, we said that each character in the story represented a piece of the audience that was listening to the story from Jesus, right? So the sinners, tax collectors, that was the younger brother, Jesus and the Father and their similarity there. And then there's even more from Jesus on the back end of this, and that's kind of how we wrapped our service up Sunday. Yeah. And then you had the older brother, who is the Pharisees and the scribes. And I think as you start to get this full picture, I know one of the things that I did intentionally Sunday, because I want to bring this point out. I think sometimes it's so easy to say, oh, no, that's not me, that's them, right? Just with anything, whenever we wrestle through these passages in Scripture, we always want to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. Chip, one of the things you say all the time is we judge ourselves by our intentions and other people by their actions.
Absolutely.
Right? And so one of the things I did on the front end of this service, out of the message, was go to Matthew chapter 23 and just look through that and say, hey, I want you to know if the older brother is who is represented here by the Pharisees. Here is what Jesus says to and about the Pharisees. And so I just thought that was a good perspective bringer, I guess. Yeah. Like you get there to Matthew chapter 23, and he just rattles this stuff off to them.
Woe to you.
Yeah, and let me see if I can find it. He calls them several different things, and then there's even, I think, in Luke chapter 14, maybe some other things, but he calls them blind guides, blind fools, blind people, hypocrites, whitewashed tombs, snakes, and vipers. And so when you talk about the severity, I guess, of the sinfulness here, right? You have the younger brother who's supposed to be, wow, this guy's crazy sinful, yet the older brother is who Jesus is trying to get the point across to, and this is how he lists those people. And so
he's definitely talking to the Pharisees and the scribes, right? That's his audience that he has in mind. Not that the tax collectors and sinners didn't hear him, but that's not who he was addressing. It's very clear in chapter 15 verse 3 that he's talking to the, quote, older brothers who are there. And one of the things that I think it's worth remembering, and I mentioned in the message, I'm not sure, if Eddie, AJ, or if you did, that the older brother's not real. This is a fictitious story. Right. Jesus made this story up to illustrate a point, but the Pharisees he was talking to, they were very real. They existed. And like you said, in Matthew 23, Jesus goes on to talk about them. And I think the point, though, And here's where we got to be careful, because this is where younger brothers can get a little bit of older brother in them to say, oh, yeah, Jesus was all about the sinners. They were coming to listen to him. Jesus loves sinners. It's those self-righteous Pharisees. That's who Jesus can't stand. That's the enemies. Look at how he condemns them. Like you said, look at that language in Matthew 23. Those are the bad guys. No. Mm-hmm. They're both the bad guys.
Right.
It's the younger brothers and the older brothers. And it's very funny how older brothers can turn younger brother really quick when they feel like God owes them something and hasn't paid up.
Man.
And how younger brothers can turn older brother really quick when they're saying, we weren't the bad guy, you were the bad guy all along. But one of my favorite things in this story is that when you read it closely, the father runs essentially to both sons. Right? It's the younger son on his way home while he's still a far way off, Jesus says. The father goes to him, falls on his neck, and then the older brother, who is outside, opposed to the father, refusing to come into the party, what does the father do? He runs outside and says, son, come on in. The word literally is plead with him. And so the point is, there's not a good side and a bad side. It's not, man, you'd want to be a younger brother because at least they're not self-righteous. And you don't want to be an older brother because it's not that just, you are, well, what am I looking for? You're not the guy who's just like, well, at least I'm doing the right things and I'm not being this, wicked, evil person. No, both of them are far from the Father, and both of them need the reconciling work of the Father to bring them home. And that's why I love what Keller does in that book, is he says, that the gospel's not left or right. It's not religious or irreligious. It's not moral or immoral. It's not conservative or liberal. The gospel is a third way altogether. In its view, everybody is wrong. Everybody needs to repent, but ultimately everybody is shown grace and welcomed into the Father's home if we just repent and believe.
Yeah, and that's what's to me, it's so cool, because we said this Sunday, we said lostness looks different for different people.
That's right.
So there's a spectrum, right? And on that spectrum is lostness, but your lostness may not look like somebody else's lostness, right? And so I think that's fascinating, because Jesus starts to make the point in the story, and he says, okay, now, Pharisees, I want you to understand, the older brother refuses to come into the party that's being thrown for the younger brother. And then, like you said, Chip, there's a response from the father, which to me is fascinating, right? So you have this moment where this party's being thrown, and I love to infer. I don't know. That's one of the things I love about scriptures. I
like to color it in.
Color it in. Yeah, I love to color it in. Yeah. And as I'm reading through this story, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, all right, so there's a party. The older brother probably doesn't like that. He probably starts to understand what's going on, and
no doubt it's a very public party,
right?
100%.
And then he sees, and we talked about this last week, he sees the fattened calf that probably subconsciously he's hoping is for him at some point, right? Like, this is the fatted calf, and I'm the oldest son, and there's a sick, I got the first bit of the inheritance and all this stuff. And so then he comes home, there's a party, he doesn't go get the brother like we talked about this week, he should have. So he doesn't go get him, he comes home, there's a party, he hates that there's a party, he hates that the younger brother's getting all this stuff, and he decides to stay outside the party. But then the father has a response. Maybe talk about the response the father has to the son saying, I'm not going in there. I'm not celebrating this nonsense.
Yeah, I think the first one is kind of like what we already mentioned, is that the father goes to him. Like we said, this is no doubt a very public celebration, and in a shame-honor culture that Jesus grew up in, because one of the things that will help you read your Bible differently is to understand that Jesus did not grow up in a Western culture. He grew up in an Eastern culture.
Yeah.
Now, it's a Near Eastern culture, but it's an Eastern culture. And shame, honor were very big, especially running through families. And, I mean, just to shorten it up, the older brother could have been kicked out of the family or even put to death just as much as the younger brother for the way he just shamed his father publicly, And yet, the father leaves the party to go out to him, to plead with him to come back in, to plead, hey, come into the party. Come into this celebration that we know very clearly represents heaven, right? The first two stories in this parable, the sheep and the coin, make that very clear. But then what I find fascinating is that the son tells him why he doesn't want to come into the party. And did you notice what the reason was? The reason that he gives him for not wanting to come into the party is because I've never disobeyed you. Mm. Now, that seems like a very weird reason to not come into the party. But when we really begin to dig in to what was going on there in that context, it makes a lot of sense. Because number one, like you said, AJ, he was thinking that was his fattened calf. Mm-hmm. And now this younger brother, and what he says is, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes.
Yeah, he's just not pulling any punches.
Right? You slaughtered it for him. You never gave a goat for me and the boys to hang out and celebrate with, right? Yeah. Much less a community celebration. How about just a goat for us to do a barbecue with me and my boys, you know?
Yeah.
And what that shows us is that, and I think this is true of very religious people, older brothers, people like me, this is kind of where I am in my heart, is sometimes it's easy to feel like that your obedience earns you something from God. And then when you feel you don't get it, or you feel like it goes to other people, and this was the Pharisees and scribes' problem very specifically, is they felt like what they had earned was going to people who had not earned it. They worked hard for it. These other people were getting it freely, and so they had issues. And that's what he's saying. I never disobeyed you. This isn't fair. This isn't right. It's mine. And he doesn't go in. And so he stands opposed to the Father because of his goodness.
So, okay, that's good. So for you two, right, because you guys have specifically said on this episode, you sometimes struggle with, right, or have struggled with in the past, some of the older brother mentality, right, that sense of justice, that sense of I did the right things and that person did the wrong things. So what does that look like for you? Like, how do you get to a point, or what do you do when you get to that point? Has it ever happened? Has it happened recently? Because I think there's a lot of people that are there and they're probably listening and they're like, all right, so now what do I do? Like, you're right. I am upset about that. I don't like that. So, like, how do you navigate that would be my question.
Well, I'll let Chris, if you want to, talk to that, you can, because I would say that my older brotherness at this stage of my life is a little bit different. My older brotherness tends to come out against older brothers.
Okay. Sure.
Like that. That's kind of where I'm at. And, right. You hear people say, you get most aggravated in others about what you really see and hating yourself.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of me. So I'm not sure. I feel like that I'm kind of past the place of feeling like my obedience earned something from God. And so I get, angry when I don't get it. But that older brotherness comes out when I see other people doing that same thing. Okay. That's when I get judgy and, irritated and whatever. So, yeah.
Which is like, real quick, Chris, maybe like an inception moment, because then you're just a layer deeper, right? It is right. I mean, into the whole, I don't like that kind of lostness, and so now that's right, 100%. So that's fascinating.
What's funny also is we just had a generational gap. He said Inception. I immediately think Shrek with ogres are like onions.
We have layers. Yeah, peeled them layers back. That's good.
I saw this sign in town that said, if you do good things, God will do good stuff for you. And I was like,
in our town?
Yeah, it was something like that. And I was like,
what were you saying about a bad theology section? All right, go ahead.
Hey, let us hear from you. We're thinking about a new section of the podcast, Hot Take Bad Theology. Let us hear from you. All right.
And I think it might have been a church. But anyways, I was like, there's definitely rules out there that say, if you do these things, then these reactions will happen, kind of laws that are like set in place. I'm trying to think of an example, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're a good person, good things will happen to you.
Sure.
Because of the fallen world that we live in.
So you're saying, like, typically in life, when you do the right thing, there will be good consequences. When you do the wrong thing, there will be bad consequences.
If you tithe, if you give, then you'll be blessed, right? That's kind of like a natural law, I would say.
That's the Santa Claus vending machine God, right? If I do good things, I get stuff off my wish list. Or if I do these specific good things, then I can vend this specific blessing from God.
Right.
And that's a very prominent theology. The idea of, well, if I, do these things, then, and we like to say, we don't say God owes me. What we say is that God's going to honor that.
Lord,
right? God's going to honor that. God is going to, God has promised that if we sow, we will also reap. Well, yes, but not like a vending machine. You don't get to decide that. And at the end of the day, we live in a world broken by sin. Are there principles that God has ordered the world to, operate within? Absolutely. But principles are just that. They're principles.
Yeah.
And so, I think you're right, Chris. I think there is that idea that is very attractive to older brothers. If I slave away for you all these years, then one day I'm going to get the fattened calf.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You get that leg up on God, basically, that you're like, oh, I've been obedient. Like, I should be able to get these things.
Yeah, so circling all the way back, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but when you get to those moments, or when you have gotten to those moments, I'm not assuming they still happen all the time, but how do you navigate them?
Right, yeah, I mean, I can think of a few examples, but I don't know if I probably focused more on, like, the good things that have happened in my life that, like, yeah, because I've tithed and invested and tried to do these good things that I've had good happen in my life. Not that there's not bad things that have happened, but I don't focus on those things as much.
Yeah, so I think here's a good way to understand that, because I want to hit on what you just said. When you do these things that God says you should do, you're going to see a lot of good things happen in your life.
Right.
Why? Well, because God designed you, God designed other people, God designed the world, and he desires human flourishing. And so when we operate by the standards which God has set for us, typically stuff just works out better. That's because the guy who designed it said this is how it works. Now, that's not always true, though, right? Because, I heard a guy say one time, he said, look, my uncle exercised every day. He never ate bad. He never had sugar, didn't drink caffeine, and he died at 35 getting hit by a vegetable truck. It was a joke. He didn't really.
The irony of it all.
But the principle is that you can do all of these things that are supposed to lead to a long, happy, healthy, prosperous life. But because we live in a world broken by sin, so much of it's out of our control anyway. It's not a 1 = 1, right? I think that the same thing is true in the inverse, and that's that people can be super shady and slimy and get away with it.
Yeah.
So
let me maybe ask it a different way, because I want y'all to hit on this, because I think this is where a lot of people are. A lot of older brothers, and which is what this week is all about. You have seen this in yourself. Like, you have gotten to the point where you're like, I don't like that. You realize, okay, I'm being the older brother here. The question is, what do you do to combat that? How do you walk yourself out of that mentality is my question.
Well, I think it's grace, right? It's the same thing. And that's what makes the gospel, is that the gospel is the message that brings younger brothers home. And it's the gospel that brings older brothers into the party. Mm-hmm. And it is the gospel of grace. The younger brother in the pig pen, what does he say? My father's a generous man. His servants are better than this. I should go back home and just be a servant. It is the goodness and grace of the father that brings the younger prodigal son back home. What does the father appeal to the older brother at the end of the story? He says, look, everything I have is yours. I've never withheld anything from you, but we had to celebrate because this brother of yours, the son of mine who was dead's alive. He was lost, now he's found. And so he's appealing by grace. The issue is, I feel like that older brothers can be inoculated to grace.
Okay.
Does that make sense when I say inoculated to grace?
Yeah, unpack it. Like, go a layer deeper. So help me, if I'm the average listener, how do I get to that point that you're talking about, inoculated to grace, and then how do I wrestle through it?
So inoculated to grace, and I don't know if this makes sense to anybody but me. It's just the way I think about things. It's, if you're getting a flu shot, right? What is a flu shot? Gives you a little bit of the flu, so that you can build up a resistance to it, right?
Yeah.
Because if you get just enough, it's not enough to really make you sick, even though you may get a little sick, but you then begin to build a resistance to it. And I think that there are a lot of older brothers who, in their very religious nature, or maybe even by their upbringing, grow up in church, grow up in, what Chris is saying, do these things, God will do this, God will do this, God will do this. They get taught about by preachers who preach about people who aren't in the room, about all the wicked people that are out there and how they all need to be like us in here. And they hear the word gospel and they sing about amazing grace, but they never get the full, in the context of this series, they don't get the full prodigalness of that goodness and grace. And so just that small dose over time begins to indoctrinate them to it. Inoculate them to it.
I was with you.
And so then when it comes time that they need grace, they don't see the breadth and the depth of it. They just say, oh, yeah, I do need you. I am really sorry, God. I need you to forgive me one more time. Yeah. And it's more like they need God to just give them a pass than to be really
changed,
overwhelmed by that compelling grace of the Father.
Have y'all ever had a moment where you sensed the big brotherness in you and you said, you know what? This is not good. I need to go to them and I need to apologize for maybe even something they didn't see in my big brotherness.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that. Matter of fact, in the context of even just honestly serving here at the Orchard, I had to go to Michael, our executive pastor, good friend of mine, right there by my side, as close as a brother, and go to him and say, man, I have not had a right heart or attitude towards you during this specific season, and say, and I just need to, I've repented to God. I need to repent to you because it was toward, you. And he showed grace, and was forgiving and understanding. And I still get aggravated with him because he can be a butthead sometimes, but
not a butthead.
not it's seriousness, there have been those moments where it just, comes up and you have to say, I need to own this.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to restate or, kind of say what I understood from what you were saying, that we ask for grace, but not necessarily change. Like we need to repent and change from our actions.
Question mark.
Yeah. Is that what you're?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some of that. And I think that would be an indicator of lostness in big brothers. And maybe the way I said it Sunday at Live Oak could bring a little clarity, is that you can feel the older brotherness when you look around and you say, man, the world would be a lot better place if everybody was like me. And that's the thing, because AJ, you keep saying, you guys, identify with the older brothers. You guys identify with the older brothers. And I do, admittedly,
right.
The truth is we all have a little older brother and a little younger brother in us. Keller says in the book, this isn't an either or,
right,
that we all have both in us in many ways. But I think my gut is that predominantly you filter the world through one of those lenses more than the other. Yeah. But everybody's got that older brother in them, because at some point we've all said, well, if they were just more like me, then they would be better.
Yeah.
And that's what is that is older brother, because that is saying that I don't need to change. They do, because I'm right, they're wrong.
Yeah. It's funny because I was talking to Mary Beth last week, and the series, this is what we hope happens with the series just like this, right? We hope that as you're going through it, you have the epiphanies of, oh, dang, I'm doing that. Oh, dang, I'm treating that person this way. And she was asking me about somebody in particular, and I was like, that's my younger brother right now, and I'm really trying to lean into it the right way. And the series has helped me step back and be like, all right, AJ, you need to remind yourself that it's the gospel that changes people, and they need grace. And messiness looks a lot different for a lot of different people. And right now, you just don't like the way this messiness looks in particular. Because there's some messiness that I love. Right. Like, if you're lost as a ball in high weeds, and I see that, and I don't see necessarily a self-righteousness in you, kind of to what you were saying about your Big Brother season, and I see just like genuine, this guy is lost. I love that. Like that's the younger brother I want to lean into so much. The younger brother that I struggle with is maybe more like the older brother, where you're like, no, whether void of religion or not, you think you have your crap together. You think you're better than everybody, yada, yada, yada.
Oh, yeah, that's older brother, 100%.
It's older brother, but void of religion, I guess, right? And that's Jesus' maybe point in this story, is that they're religious. But for this one, it's moral. It's morality. It's not religion.
Yeah, it's more morality, immorality. Religious, irreligious is a little bit more specific. But, in general, the two lenses are younger brothers are self-discovery, desire fulfillment. Older brothers are more, this is the right way, the right thing, and if I uphold this moral structure, everything is going to be, better because of it. So I think, even to simplify it down even further, younger brothers say indulge yourself, older brothers say restrain yourself.
Yeah. And there's some, I don't know, I'm like processing this as we talk, but I think there's a younger brother Like, there's one personality that gets me, that I would say, pretty honestly, really irks me sometimes, and it's the younger brother that acts like the older brother. Like, you are clearly...
just an irreligious older brother.
Yeah, you are clearly like, you don't give a crap, yet you think you're better than everybody else, even in your I don't give a crap. And I like desperately want you to understand that's not how this works. But I can't like will you into that. I have to be gracious to have that conversation. And usually it's not even the conversation because of where you're at, where that particular person is at. It's usually the kindness that I show them. It's usually the kindness that I start to display toward them that they say, hey, this guy's all right. I want to hear what he has to say, kind of thing.
I find this pretty funny because AJ and I have had the conversation, Chris, that when AJ and I argue, or when I see AJ argue with anybody, because the truth of the matter, the more you know, AJ and I, we may be different, but we actually are a lot alike in a lot of ways. Matter of fact, we joke that AJ and I are probably more alike than anybody else, on staff. It just looks different, through personality lenses.
Because lostness looks different.
That's right. But I said, AJ, it just finally hit me one day. You don't need everybody to know you're right. You want them to know they're wrong.
Come on.
That's what you need. And he's like, yeah.
It's true. And I'm like, man, if we get there, we could work with the rest of it.
But I don't care if you know I'm right. You just need to know you're wrong.
Right. And I think that's where, and we all have that. And that's why I wanted to ask you guys those questions, because I think we all have a spot that when somebody pushes it, it really irks us. And there's a personality type that's going to rub you on that spectrum of younger brother to older brother. And I think, as we walk through the series, there's got to be a level of honesty with yourself that says, okay, this is where I'm at, and this is how they make me feel, and this is why I don't like that, and whatever. And you go through that whole process and ask yourself the hard questions. What kind of brother am I being? Because what we see at the end of this story and how we finished our message Sunday was there's a right way to be an older brother. And this is probably what rubbed the Pharisees the wrong way the most, because as I'm inferring again, I'm coloring, what did you say? Coloring the pages, whatever, coloring it in. As I'm reading this story and as I'm inferring, you have a moment where the Pharisees are listening and they're probably like, finally, me and this Jesus guy are on the same page, because the older brother never goes to get the younger brother, right? And we said culturally that's what should have happened. The older brother should have gone out and gotten the younger brother. And so the Pharisees are listening to this, and there's probably a moment where they're like, that's right, he's not saying it, because even Jesus knows the younger brother's not worth going to get, and so the older brother's not doing it. And then Jesus flips the whole thing on its head again, and he's like, no, you should. I'm doing this because you won't. I'm being the older brother because you haven't been.
Yeah, I think that the Pharisees were all on board with Jesus when he was like, and the younger brother wasted everything and a famine came to the land and he was in a pig pen, and they're like, yeah, heck yeah, keep going. Amen, preacher, step on toes.
Right.
And then they realized, oh shoot, the father had two sons and the older brother came in from the field. The way that I color in that page is that I'm not sure that immediately any of them realized that the true older brother, the better older brother, was missing.
Right.
Until they kind of sit back and think about it. Because in Luke chapter 19, Jesus talking to Zacchaeus, who is what? A tax collector and a sinner. And he's going to go to his house and eat with him. And what do they complain to the Pharisees and the scribes? He welcomes sinners and eats with them. Mm-hmm. He's going to Zacchaeus' house in Luke chapter 19. And then Jesus says this. He says, the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which is lost, those who are lost, right? And so I think maybe it's around then that maybe, this is silence, this is speculation.
Right.
But maybe then that light bulb starts going off and say, wait a minute, he's the one who's out there looking for those brothers who are sisters who are far from home.
Yeah.
And I think that what makes that such a beautiful picture for me is really understanding the cost behind it, right? So, we sometimes we have a nerd out section planned, sometimes, we don't, but let's just say this is our nerd out section. For forgiveness to come, there has to be a price paid. And we have talked about this on this very podcast, right? Like, if AJ backs into my truck leaving today, I can be like, dude, don't worry about it. I know it was a mistake. I was parked in a bad place. I'm not. But, all of that stuff, But at the end of the day, for my truck to be fixed, I got to pay for it. AJ's got to pay for it. The insurance company's got to pay for it. Somebody's got to pay for it, because to fix that brokenness, to bring about reconciliation and restitution, a price has to be paid. Yeah. Okay. And part of what ticks this older brother off is that he's the one who's paying this price. Mm-hmm. The father looks at him and says, everything I have is yours. He was being very literal when he said that, right? Because when the younger son comes to the father at the beginning of the story, he says, I want you to give me my share of the estate. Jesus says a father has 2 sons. The younger son says, give me my share. He gives it to him. So then by default, everything that is left is the older brother's.
Right.
That's his share. So at the end of the day, when the younger brother comes home and the father says, get the robe, the ring, the sandals, slaughter the fattened calf, don't miss that. That is his robe. That's his ring. Yeah. Those are his sandals. Mm-hmm. That's his calf. That should be him in the party. Mm-hmm. He's the one paying for it. And that ticks him off. And he's begrudging because he thinks he earned that from the father. Why in the heck would he give it to this no good, prodigal, wayward son who's devoured everything with prostitutes? Mm-hmm. And yet when we see Jesus as that true older brother, that better older brother who isn't in the story, who reconciles us to the Father, we need to see that through the lens that for Jesus to bring us home, it cost him something. Mm-hmm. We are clothed in the robe of his righteousness. We are given a ring of his authority as co-heirs before the Father. Our feet are shod with his sandals, which Paul says are the gospel of peace. He is not a fattened calf who was slain. He is the lamb who was slain so that we could be invited to the marriage feast in heaven in Revelation. Like, this is Jesus paying that cost for us, and he does so out of joy.
Yeah.
He is that better older brother.
I love it.
And what makes that an even better, notch it up, take another notch, because this is the nerd out section, right? If we push this logically, let's say that, and let me just say this fictional story, so at some point it's not meant to be pushed this far, but we're going to do it. Let's say at some point the prodigal leaves home again, and he comes back, and the father does it again. I'm going to forgive you. Give him a robe, a ring, sandals. Let's throw a feast. Mm-hmm. He leaves home again, comes back home, says, you know what? I'm forgiving him. Let's bring the robe, the ring, the sandals, the feast. At some point, that piece of the family pie is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because this younger brother is eating into the older brother's riches and devouring them and wasting them and losing them. And at some point, it runs out. Here's the great news about Jesus. The righteousness that he gives us is an infinite righteousness that can never run out. So anytime a younger brother or an older brother comes back home to the Father and Jesus says, all right, go get another one of my robes, go get another one of my rings, go get some more sandals, let's get another calf. We, as much as we draw from it, we will never diminish how much is available.
Yeah.
And that's phenomenal.
It's good
to think about.
That is good. It's a never-ending supply of grace over and over and over
that's
again.
Right.
Man. That's so good. I love it. I think it's been good. And I think that's how, as we kind of wrap this thing up, as we wrap this series up, I hope that that truth is the truth that leads you to being less like the older brother, right? Because that truth, what Jesus, I believe, is trying to get across to the Pharisees, verse 32, right? It is, we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. That reality is what he's trying to get across the Pharisees. That's what matters. That there are broken, lost things that I love, that I want to see come to the kingdom. And the kingdom is not just for you. The kingdom is for them. And so as we start to hear the story, as we start to hear those implications that you just unpack, what it should do is it should compel us to look different, to live different, to treat younger brothers different, to treat older brothers different, because we were the older brother, right? A lot of us at certain times in our lives. And so, man, hopefully, as we round out this series, you see that being the point, and you see that being the point of Jesus' conversation, that he cares about lost people, and what you do impacts lostness. And so we want to do it the right way.
Absolutely, because we want to be those better older brothers like Jesus was, that better older sister, who goes and helps reconcile those who are far from the Father, whether they're in a distant country or still on the farm, reconcile them to the Father. And I would say, for me, I think one of the biggest changes that ever happened in my own spiritual formation is the day that I realized that it is not my effort to quit being an older brother. It's not my grit your teeth and try it one more time to stop being religious or moral or irreligious or immoral, right? The only means by which we have the power to change is when we see Jesus, when we behold him. One of the things that I wish I could get into every head of every Christian that I talk to, the key to spiritual formation is that you have to see Jesus, because we are changed in the seeing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think stories like this are so impactful, right? Because we remember what we said that Keller described this as at the very beginning of this series, is that if the gospel is an ocean, this is one of those spots that's so crystal clear. Yeah. You can see all the way to the bottom, and it looks like it's even closer to the surface because it's so crystal clear. And that's what I love about this. You see Jesus so clearly that once we begin to get this, we are changed simply in the seeing. And I love that.
That's good, man. That's good. I would say last thing, it's more of a question, because I think it's a question worth addressing. So you have a moment where, as an older brother, you realize that you're an older brother, and you start to pivot off of being an older brother. What do you do, or what are some indicators that you're hopping back over that blurry line and you're starting to become a blurry brother, an older brother again, right? So there's a sweet spot where I go from I understand I've been saved by grace, and there's a blurry line where we start to work and leak into good works. What are some indicators that tell me, all right, I'm starting to leak back into works here. I'm starting to leak back into thinking I've earned it here?
Well, I think you just said it. It is that feeling of entitlement and earning. You know, like when you feel like I've earned anything, then that's the red flag, right? A pastor said one time that the gospel is not opposed to effort. Mm-hmm. It is opposed to earning. That doesn't mean we don't work. We live for good works. We work for the glory of our Father. We work to please him. We work for the good of our neighbor, to love them. We just don't earn anything because of it.
Yeah.
And the reason why we don't earn is because there's nothing left to earn. You can't earn what's already been freely given. Mm-hmm. And so I think you said it. It's that when I start to feel like I have earned something, and maybe you don't even realize that until you don't get it. Mm. When you don't get what you feel like you earned, maybe when you realize, oh, shoot, I thought I earned that. But I think it is that sense of earning that's that major red flag for older brothers.
Yeah, I said this Sunday in Lake City, but I said it's funny because for both ends of the spectrum on lostness here, the qualifying factor for whether or not they're loved is that they're made in the image of God. So the thing that qualifies you to be loved by God is not something you brought to the table in the first place. It is strictly that you were made in the image of God. And so God is the one that qualifies you for love, not your effort, not your earning, not any of that. It is God who starts the process, and it's God who finishes the process. So I think as we keep the conversation going, it's a good thing to keep your mind on, to remember that it is God who's afforded you the opportunity to even have this conversation about loving your neighbor in the first place.
What does Paul say? Paul tells, it's the Philippian church, right? Man, I'm blanking on a reference. Oh, well, you can fact check me.
Okay. We do that around here.
Yeah.
Points at Chris.
Paul tells the church, he says that it is God at work in you, mm-hmm. both to will and to work.
Yeah.
So that desire is from God, and the ability to work and change and grow is from God. So if you're treating God as a vending machine, maybe it starts with realizing you don't even have any quarters unless he gives them to you, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you know, like it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work.
It's good. It's a good way to round it out. It is indeed Philippians chapter 2, by the way. Man, any concluding thoughts from the series or anything you want people to know as we kind of round this out? Chris, Chip, anything?
I think for me, get the book if you haven't. I think it's good. And I want to be clear, like when you read the book, you're going to hear a lot of stuff you heard in the series. And that's because as we've said all along, this book really shaped my heart and mind around this text. So, I mean, it was going to leak in all over it. And we're not trying to hide that. This isn't plagiarism. Yeah. This is read the book,
We're plagiarizing good theology.
Yeah, read the book.
Us. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that, like I said, and I'll just hit it one more time because it's so important, we have to learn that younger brothers do not change by learning how to be more of an older brother, and older brothers don't change by learning how to embrace more of a younger brother lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Neither are right, neither are better. It is the third way, which is the way of Jesus. Good. And getting that third way theology is so critical in a world that's as right and left as ours is today.
Love it. Chris, anything?
Yeah, I say read the book, listen to it, and then go back and listen to the message.
Love it.
Yeah, they're online. On the website.
That's right, they are.
On YouTube.
Stud Muffin. I love it.
There's a podcast for it. You can go back and listen to it after you've read.
We have a podcast?
Yeah, just for the sermon.
Are we recording this?
We should talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Cool. Last thing, I'll say this before we kind of round it out. I got a text while we were doing this and said, so you going to get me one of those hats or what? Let's go. I'll let you guys know. We'll keep posted. Location pastors will keep you posted. They're probably going to go like hotcakes, so we'll keep you in the loop. But until next week, when we start a brand new thing, we will catch you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow in this journey of faith and embrace community. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us through our social media channels or visit our website and stay connected. Your questions are what make this podcast a dynamic and enriching experience. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your engagement helps us spread the message and connect with others who may find value in these conversations. Until next time, we hope this episode inspired you and will help you bring Sunday's message into your week ahead. Keep the conversation alive, and remember, we're all on this journey together.